Okay, I'm just going to say a few words then, just to kick things off. Stefania, if you could just keep an eye on any new members on the waiting room, that'd be amazing. So thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining in. Good evening, and obviously thank you to Stefania for joining us this evening. Like I say, a bit of background and a bit of a call for help here. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Barry Cranford. I'm the founder of the London Java community. I'm not a developer myself. I run a tech recruitment company called RecWorks. So here at RecWorks, we've been on a mission for the last 12 years to prove that recruitment can be a force for good in the tech industry, beyond just getting people jobs. And that's really specifically around learning, career development, mentoring, that kind of thing. Put simply, if people want to learn and people are happy to teach or to share, then we're happy to put people together. And that can be on a group basis, like this evening, and through communities like the LJC, and also on a one-to-one level. So the biggest example of what we do is our Meet and Mentor community, which got really close links to the LJC. We organize introductions between mentees and mentors, and the mentees can be anything from students to engineers to junior CTOs or aspiring speakers and things like that. So we've made over 2,500 introductions now. We've got about 1,700 members, but we're always looking for more mentors. So if you're happy to help, I'll put a little link in the chat in a minute. Please do sign up or see me afterwards on LinkedIn. It's all powered by revenue from recruitment. So we don't make any money from anything that we do other than getting people jobs. So if you're personally looking to hire, or if you're a company that's looking to hire, you can put in a good word for RecWorks, then please do let us know. Anyway, on to this evening. So like I say, lucky to be joined by Stefania Chaplin, who's going to be speaking on how developers are the new security rock stars.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Barry. And thank you everyone for joining this evening. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So bear with me. Should be sharing and presenting. So hopefully you can see my screen. If not, shout out, but hopefully fingers crossed. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Today, I'm going to be talking about Dev to DevSec, why security-aware developers are the new rock stars. So today's agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about, hashtag who am I, a little bit about Java, and I say this, it's kind of about the Java breaches, things that might have gone wrong with organizations. The ancient history of software creation, it's going to be a bit of a history lesson looking at Waterfall, Agile, DevOps, how security is being introduced, so DevSecOps, and why security is a shared responsibility, and ultimately why security-aware developers are the future, and transforming from Dev to DevSec, a tactical guide. Also, there's a little exclusive for everyone on this call. There is a future event in 2 weeks. We have got a Secure Code Warrior tournament coming up in 2 weeks' time, but I will come to that at the end. And then, of course, Q&A. So, who am I? Well, my name is Stefania Chaplin, and originally I was trained as a Java developer. And then I worked in a startup as lead Python developer. So I call myself a backend developer. I don't want to offend if there's anyone on here that does JavaScript or full stack. For me, I'm really happy in terminal, print line is my friend, or, system out, etc. After this, I worked as a solutions architect, focusing on open source software. So software composition analysis. So for example, any components that you're getting from Maven Central, that was, I worked for a company called Sonotype, and they would provide information on, on these components. So for example, hopefully everyone on the call knows Struts 1, because most people are on Struts 2. Struts 1, every version is actually vulnerable, and it's the same across all languages. So in JavaScript, Angular 1, and in Django, I think Django 0.8 has about 40 vulnerabilities. So anyway, this was kind of the bread and butter, and this is where I've come from. And now I'm working at Secure Code Warrior. And the thing that really got me is I was working in DevOps, and everyone talks about shifting left and not passing defects downstream, and that's the status quo. Secure Code Warrior, what we say is, why don't we start left? So we're all about gamified security training, and I'm going to come to that. But first, my presentation. So a little bit about Java, ... breaches of the past. So I'm pretty sure quite a few people on the call have probably heard about Equifax. You know, I'm not going to go over too much, but 2017, 143 million people. They lost about 1/3 of their market cap, and they had like huge fines, like nearly $1 billion. And this was because a vulnerable version of structs was being used. I think it was either 2.5.12 or 2.5.13. I can't quite remember, but it was to do with a vulnerable version of open source. And if you think about this related to OWASP, this is kind of your classic A9 using components with known vulnerabilities. And this probably happened, if I'm honest, I know I'm being recorded, but in larger organizations, sometimes there can be bureaucracy. So for example, the change request may have just got lost. And the problem is when these change requests get lost and then you end up using vulnerable components, hackers will obviously swoop in. SAP, this isn't quite a vulnerability in the same way, but this is quite recent. So in June 2020, it was actually their NetWeaver application server it was certain versions of Java affected, I think 7.3 to 7.5. I know we're on much more modern versions now. But it actually affected about 40,000 SAP users. And the issue with this was the type of hack, if you think about it, was quite scary. So it lets hackers create new admin roles which can bypass access controls and segregation of duties. So classic broken access control, which is OWASP A5. And if you think about so there's the initial hack, we'll make everyone an admin. But if you think about a hacker then getting admin access, it's almost like the extrapolation of the hacking potential is huge. It's like the equivalent of a path traversal where you find the password file. So this was obviously quite a big deal, and this happened earlier this year. One final one, this isn't a particular company, it's actually 3 of them. So Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. So this was a bit of a nuanced one because it was to do with the Java version on the iOS site. So employees that visited the iPhone Dev SDK website, it was infected with zero-day malware that exploited a vulnerability in the Java browser plugin, which installed malware on their Mac computers. So it is, it is quite nuanced, but this is the thing. I say it happens to the best of us. It can happen to everyone. And if I'm honest, I was trying to pick an A to go with this, like one of the OWASP. I kind of chose on security misconfiguration just because a lot of it was to do with certificates. Obviously, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about this. But you're kind of noticing a trend like OWASP have their top 10 and CWE have their top 25. And these lists are based on the most common vulnerabilities. And what you're starting to see is not only the big organizations, they're the ones we hear about, but the smaller ones as well, they have the same, they're still susceptible to these OWASP top 10. And it's the same again and again. Like, I don't know if people know, but SQL injection has been around for almost 20 years. And guess what? The fix has been around for almost 20 years. So we're getting the same things again and again. So we're going to do our history lesson now, just to talk a little bit about the ancient history of software creation. And the reason I bring this up is because it helps to explain how we've got to today, where developers are the security rock stars. So going back in time, really back in time, we've got W. Edward Demings, who wrote Out of the Crisis. And, everyone calls Gene Kim the father of DevOps, but if you look at it, a lot of modern software methodology has actually come out of software manufacturing. And one of his points was quality, aka security, is everyone's responsibility. I've seen multiple surveys by different software providers who do their annual security survey, in the AppSec space. And you interview different personas like development, security, compliance, etc. And it's like, who's responsible for security? And everyone kind of points at each other. And the reality is quality and security is everyone's responsibility. And part of the issue is that development and security kind of in silos. Like I'm an optimist. I'm trying to live in 2020, and I'm like, this isn't always the case nowadays, but unfortunately in reality it is. And to the point where we speak different languages. I'm an ex-developer, and we talk about frameworks and constructors. and methods, etc. While security, they're talking about the OWASP versions and different types of vulnerabilities, and it's this kind of mismatch which I'd say starts the segregation, but it's also kind of different KPIs, where people sit. Developers develop, security have traditionally been at the end, so pen testers. So this can, it ends up being a siloed environment where, security can be like the bad guys, and we don't want security to be the bad guys. And if you empower developers with security, all of a sudden, hey, security rock stars. So as I mentioned, the old bugs are performing new tricks. SQL injection isn't new. Authentication, access control, the theory of it isn't new, but they keep coming up and again. So it makes you think, how can we make this better? Is it a case of adding another layer of testing tools? I think everyone knows, when you get that huge bill of materials with, all your errors or all your issues, that's not necessarily helping. It's kind of the ethos, hey, why don't we teach developers how to implement security in their code base, how to write secure codes, and then, they won't have these issues. And hey, we won't have builds or deploys failing on a Friday afternoon. And hey, maybe we can even leave at 4 on a good day. And the truth is, we can't continue, down this path. And just some general stats, but we have 111 billion lines of code produced each year on average. And if you think about it, that's a lot. And if you think about the role of security in this, how are they going to check? Or even with tools, okay, they're automated, but it's starting to get unmanageable. You need to write secure code to begin with. 0-day cyber attacks. I did mention one with the Apple iOS attack. They're estimated to reach 1 per day by 2021. I didn't mention at the time, but the Equifax, I think they had 2 days between when the hack was published and when they were hacked, and it took them 4 months to realize. So the 0-day attacks are going to keep coming. So we obviously need to be prepared for this. And the demand for security personnel far outweighs supply and will only get worse. And I'm going to touch on this in a few slides. So where has this all come from? Waterfall, it's been around a while. I think originally it was, around the 1970s. And in paper, looks great. We do our analysis, we do our design and planning, we do our coding and then testing, and there's our finished product. Obviously, things change. So what might have been relevant, 6 months ago isn't. So there are some industries, maybe also I've been told, nuclear power plants, probably can't be switching them on 2-week cycles. And I hope no one is at a power plant is on this talk and will correct me, or maybe that's great. Please do correct me. But anyway, with Waterfall, we definitely evolved past that because what we found was things started to go out of date and out of touch fairly quickly. And especially if you find a bug, and you're already, 18 months or 2 years into a cycle, it's going to be quite painful to go upstream or up the waterfall. And when I speak to people that say aren't technical, the comparison I talk about is say, hey, remember Windows 95? And then we had Windows 98 and Windows 2000. This was very waterfall. You had your big releases every few years. Whilst now we have Microsoft or, Windows 365. Isn't it great? And part of that has come, one of the steps between was Agile. And this came about, the 2-week sprints. It's interesting, if you actually look at the Agile methodologies, of which the core ones, it's actually it's about people, not process. It's about, not having too much bureaucracy. It's actually quite a holistic manifesto. But the end result was having traditionally these sprints are usually 2, sometimes 3 weeks, and it's all about small features and being released quickly. And this is probably what I see most common nowadays when I go and talk to customers, or, when I'm, stalking around Twitter, or at least I think everyone kind of wants to be here, at least at some level of Agile. And then we have DevOps. So anyone who hasn't read the Phoenix Project, honestly, I've been in DevSecOps for a few years. I actually only read this book during lockdown, and it's so good. Partly because it's like fictitious, or it's written from the perspective of an IT ops manager who goes to work. It's not like a textbook, it's an actual book, and it talks through the different personas. And I promise I'm not on that payroll. Like, I just really enjoyed it. But it really helps to understand how and why we need to get dev and ops to speak together, standardization of environments, quick replies. If there's a problem in ops, let's fix it in code. Let's get that deployed ASAP. So I think this was really quite a turning point in terms of the psychology of, okay, actually, let's give, I think some comparison I had, it was something like, if you were going to tell, 2005, if you were going to tell some senior people, hey, let's give devs, more access, let's get them to test more, let's give them, more power, etc. And actually it'll make bugs go down. If you heard that, you'd be like, really? I thought it'd be the opposite. Like, are you crazy? But in reality, that is what's going on. And that's kind of what's leading to this DevSecOps movement. So I've kind of let the cat out of the bag, but when we talk about DevOps and even Agile and Waterfall, what about security? So there was this great animation, I think it was Pete Cheslock in about, I think it was 2014 or 2015, DevOps Day, Texas. And DevOps, magical unicorn, 10 releases a day, this is great. But the problem is, if you're doing 10 releases a day, and if they're 10 vulnerable releases, like, we've got a plain text password. Very simple example. I'm only saying this, it happened to me yesterday when using a product. But then, and I was sharing my screen, it was very embarrassing. Anyway, we've got this plain text password, and then we've released it, and someone's like, we need to fix it. Oh no, we've already released it again, and again, and again. All of a sudden, you'll get this magical unicorn, but unfortunately, there is a bit of unicorn poop that security has to clear up. And you can see in this example, that person does not look very happy. Which brings us to DevSecOps. So DevSecOps is kind of looking at, it's not about, say, sec is in the middle. It's not like, okay, we'll do our security at release, because that's the kind of middle stage, or test and release between dev and ops. It's about having it at each stage. So, for example, if you're looking at planning, you've got your threat modeling, you've got code, you've got your static analysis, your peer code review. If you're doing building and testing, you've got pen testing, you've got software composition analysis. At release, you've got compliance validation, and then throughout deployment, you're logging and you're auditing and you're doing your threat intelligence. And whilst it's in production, you've got to monitor and detect response, and you've got obviously your incident response team, and then if necessary, recover. So you've got literally security at each stage. And this is part of what Gene Kim said, was that, don't push a defect downstream. My ex-CEO at my previous company had this great analogy, which talked about streams and reservoirs. Hey, if you've got all of these streams going into a big, reservoir, if one of your streams is polluted, hey, it's got vulnerabilities in it, you're going to pollute the reservoir. So why not fix our streams? If we fix our streams, the whole shifting left ethos, then then we won't have a polluted reservoir / application. And hey, security Nirvana, how happy is security? And DevOps too. This is, the dream. So how is DevSecOps changing the game? A process that cannot be bought. There was some really interesting research. I think it was about 2008. I'm not sure, 7 or 8. And I found this graph, and it really resonated with me, because if you look at, where did vulnerabilities come from? The percentage of defects introduced, the majority is in coding. A little bit of me cried inside. I'm an ex-developer, so I'm like, oh no, it's me. But the truth is, we're the ones writing the code. So we're probably going to be introducing any defects. So it can be, the bulk is there. So this is kind of really the coding. This is the area that in theory kind of needs to be addressed. And so I introduced to you the secure software development lifecycle. So we have the same from plan, code, build, test, release, deploy, operate, monitor, the same as we had before, but we've actually got two new modules, which is about security training. Like, hey, if for example, our pen test has come back red with loads of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, I know we'll speak to the development team or the development heads, and we'll put some cross-site scripting training that will resonate. Hey, why don't we make it gamified? Why don't we make it fun? So that the developers can then, do the training, learn, and not introduce new vulnerabilities. It's like I said with SQL, the fact that SQL has been around for 20 years and that the fix has as well, it kind of is a bit like this doesn't make sense. And what you end up, if you end up, starting left, you have less vulnerabilities the whole way down. So you end up in a reduction in vulnerabilities, hotfix costs, and delays. And speaking as an ex-developer, I do not like to context switch. Obviously, you can't talk about anyone on the call. But if I'm working on my new and shiny and I'm in the zone and all of a sudden I've got told I've got to fix the old thing I did that I can't even remember and I've got to revisit, hey, I'm not going to have a good time. So, yeah. We're trying to think about starting left with the secure software development lifecycle. And this is part of the thing. It's not just about, ease for developers. It's also about the cost. So bugs are cheapest when you start left. I've seen different bits of research. I'd say my favorite is one by IBM, which said the difference in cost between, hey, if I fix a bug in the IDE versus if I fix a bug in production, it's kind of like a bar chart, and it's 100 times more expensive to fix a bug in production. And I've seen those numbers vary. Sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's in between. But the point is, imagine, people talk about integrating with the IDE, and that's awesome and that's great, and I'm all for that. But imagine Inception style, if we could, I'm not going to say integrate with developers' minds, but if we could shift left. So before a developer even writes or introduces insecure code, what about if they could, if they knew what the secure code was? Like, oh yeah, SQL injection. Oh, let's write it in a parameterized query. Or, oh, we're doing a login page. Let's not write a method for password is wrong, because obviously then the hacker would know the username exists. So it's all about kind of shifting left. And there's different ways you can do that: training and learning, assessments, tournaments, especially with the tournaments. I'm going to come to that in a couple of minutes because that's where the fun stuff happens. And the most important thing, changing culture is key. So this is actually nothing to do with tech. This is more of a psychological model, but it's very true. You can work somewhere and they're like, yeah, we're doing DevOps and it's great, and we've got all the Atlassian stack and we've got Azure DevOps and we've got all the app set testing tools. I'm like, okay, yes, you've got tools, but how is your culture? And changing culture is key. So you have your culture, and it's kind of how you behave, the values and attitudes you have ends up in the actions. I can't remember what it is. I think it's like think, behave, action, or that kind of ethos. And that's what's really happening, because you can say, yeah, we're doing DevOps, but how's a question I sometimes come back with, how's the relationship between between developers and security? And they're like, what relationship? Which comes back to the silo slide I had before. And this is the thing, when you get to that magical place where security is everyone's responsibilities, you resolve security issues together. And this can only really happen when you have, positive KPIs, positive relationship, where security is no longer the stick. It's like, no, you cannot deploy, or you cannot release, or you have problems, or go fix this. Where developers feel empowered and they do become the security rock stars. Which leads me on nicely to why security-aware developers are the future, the new kind of rock star. So I have seen different versions of this, having worked in DevSecOps for a while. There will never, no matter what the stat, there will never be enough AppSec people to save the day. So on average, you've got about 100 developers for every AppSec expert. In my previous company, we actually said more like 300. And to be fair, I once visited a office in Europe, And there were 300 to one security guy. The security guy was actually leaving the company and then going on a 6-month trip, like road trip around North America. So I don't know what that says about his workload and how stressed he was. But the point is, there really aren't, there aren't enough security people. So what can we do about it? Introducing security champions. And this is where the fun really begins. So with security champions, these are usually people that are either really passionate or really paranoid about security, or it can be a bit of both. But normally one of those two, I say extremes, those are your best people, because they're people that care. And they're still developers, so they can relay information to their team, and they're also very good for transferring knowledge and sending what's the word I'm looking for? Like inheritance, like when you go downstream. But they're good for channeling these security messages downstream, so that it's no longer 300 to 1. Like in general, I don't have a stat for this, but on average, I'd say it's maybe, I don't know, sometimes you get good organizations and they have a security champion for every 20 developers. And that is so much more manageable than 1 to 100. But hey, why stop there? So I present to you the secure developer. Empower all developers. Why stop at security champions? Wouldn't it be great if all developers could have the training, the understanding, and be empowered to write secure code, to make the right decisions, to not introduce vulnerabilities, and to obviously, there are loads of stats around it about in terms of, hey, if I write secure code and I don't have to do rework and context switch, then in general, I'm going to be way more productive and also way happier. So whilst we talk about security, which is fine, and security champions, which is great, why don't we just have secure developers? Wouldn't it be great? And you know what? It is actually possible. So this is where I begin the tactical guide. Making the move from dev to DevSec. And there's a couple of key ideas I'm going to talk about here. So as I mentioned before, or not even, I didn't even do it, W. Edward Demings did it, security is a shared responsibility. And security, ultimately, if you think about software, it's a quality control. So, does it work? Tick. Is it secure? Tick or cross. So it's no longer just about the CISO or the AppSec team, and it's not just about the developers. It's everyone's responsibility, and we all need to work together to do that. And there's kind of many ways that we can do that. And one of the key ones is helping nurture a highly supportive environment. So like I said, no more pointing the finger, no more, carrots and sticks. Hey, I'm all about carroting, but, no more sticks of, oh, no, you can't do this, or, oh, you did this, etc. And you can do this, for example, with KPIs. Or improving company culture. For example, having incident response team that have a share, not only just the ops guys that are having to fix it, but hey, why don't we bring development into that meeting, or why don't we bring the people that are doing the deployment into that meeting? Like having a cross-functional security team that are very positive, because ultimately we're all working for the same company, we all want the same goal, we don't want to be hacked, so why don't we work together to do this? And ultimately, the best DevSecOps teams train constantly and improve their skills as they work. Like I know, at least in the last few years, I'm always learning about new things, whether that's new languages, whether it's new, tools. Like I'm sure a few people on the call can remember, hey, remember when Docker was new? And obviously now, Kubernetes is the thing. So why don't we, SQL injection has been around for 20 years. Why don't we train on that? Developers are very intelligent people. We're very creative people. We like learning new things. I can only speak from personal experience. I play a lot of video games. I like to learn in certain ways. So why don't we kind of take advantage of that? And I'm a big fan of having the right tools to do the right job. And having, DevSecOps developer security rockstars. Oh yeah, sorry, I just covered this point. I should know my slides better. But successful DevSecOps teams have the right suite of tools for the job at hand. So I can tell you a very funny story, and I say it's very funny because it's one of those very funny that I wanted to like cry into my hands. Not many of my friends are technical, so this was a few years ago, and I was just going on Instagram stories, and one of my friends who I go out with, it was a friend of friend who I go out with occasionally, and she was working as a social media intern at, like, I don't know, an uncle startup, something in fashion. I wasn't quite sure of the details. But what she had showed me was she was editing JavaScript for their page, or it might have been HTML, and she was doing it in Word. And I was there, I think I was on the train at the time, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God, are you entering? And her like captions, oh my God, coding's so hard. Because yeah, if you're coding in Microsoft Word, oh my God. Obviously she was just doing the simple stuff like adding links or whatever, or images, but even then. So obviously I was a good friend. I was like, hey, you know, there's this thing called an IDE. I just sent her a screenshot. She's like, wow, that's so cool. So anyway, in her instance, obviously she's not a proper, you know, super developer, so she didn't know the way. But imagine if we had to use Word to code. I think all the I think all the developers on the call, that would probably be an uproar. And this is another one. This is a funny anecdote. I heard a story. This was from a colleague who was working with a financial services in the UK, and they decided as the organization to get rid of all the nice coffee machines. And then the developers revolted and they ended up getting nice coffee machines, but only for development. So this is the thing. If you're getting, I might be generalizing, but what do developers need? IDEs and coffee. So those are some examples of the right tools for the job at hand. And you can take that further. You know, you need to have your AppSec testing tool. Imagine if we had to do manual static code analysis. Gross. Or even worse, manual software composition analysis, or looking at dynamic testing. So we have these tools in place, and layers of tools are great, but, you know, let's start left. Why don't we, you know, why don't we train our developers? Why don't we, you know, make it fun? Why don't we teach them about security? And I say this is my favorite, but the best DevSecOps teams keep it real with each other. And this is another one about culture. You don't want a hostile environment. You don't want to be worried, oh no, people are going to know what I did. I remember, this was a few years ago, maybe like 4 years, I was at a meetup and it was talking, there was this woman who was an SRE, site reliability engineer working for Google, and the way she compared her job was changing F1 wheels whilst the car is still moving. And she gave an example of where there was an issue, I might get the details wrong, it was a long time ago, but there was an issue kind of with one of the data centers, and she didn't realize, you know, for quite some time. And obviously the traffic gets, you know, redirected. But the way they measure their, you know, their issues, or their kind of what's going wrong, is in, like, you know, circles, like of problem. And hers was pretty big. And then when it came to the kind of afterwards, like the let's put it on the table, and, you know, what went wrong, what could have done better, she's slightly embarrassed, but like, oh yeah, no, that was me. I can see what I did and why I did. And when I heard that story, I was like, that's great. Like, the fact that okay, everyone makes mistakes, you know, we're not computers, we're not, you know, 99.99% reliable. So if you do make mistakes, hey, own it up, learn from it, get advice from other people. I'm all about, you know, cross-functional communication. And having that, especially in a security place, that can make such a difference. And that makes, in my opinion, the best incident response teams. And so a little bit about Secure Code Warrior. We're trying to build for developers. We're very developer-centric. We employ a lot of developers. We hire a lot of ex-developers, aka me. And we've really thought about, okay, so we've got all these vulnerabilities that keep coming up, and, you know, the reports of all the, you know, I say all the all the AppSec testing tools are getting more. So why don't we think about, hey, what's going on in the developer brain? So, okay, it's, you know, it's 2020. People like things online. That's fairly true. Sometimes I actually genuinely worry between my laptop, especially coronavirus, right? But between my laptop and my mobile, and then between my DS and the PS4 and TV. I don't watch that much TV, but maybe Netflix. I'm like, how many hours a day am I looking at a screen and how much of it is online? It's a little bit worrying, but the reality is not just developers, but kind of we're all kind of living here at that stage. So why don't we have something that's easily accessible? It's not that often that anyone will go to the library to, rent out a cybersecurity book. Hands-on. So in my last company, there were about, I think, 13 SEs, and I asked around a bit, and you can also tell by speaking to people, but there are a few styles of learning. So there's kinesthetic, which is hands-on. There's visual verbal, which is reading and words. Visual non-verbal, which is colors and graphs, and audio, which is speaking. Me personally, I like watching videos. I am visual, non-verbal. I'm not much of a reader, but I like videos and graphs and colors, and I like listening. Kinesthetic is actually my weakest, but out of 13, I think there were 11 kinesthetics. And what we mean by this is like, okay, who wants to watch a video about vulnerabilities? Hey, why don't we try and hack the system? Or why don't we try and fix the vulnerable code? Why don't we, actually put fingers to keyboards and, have a go? And this touches on something I've said before. It is a generalization, I know, but to be fair, like at Secure Code Warrior, we actually have a Slack channel called Secure Code Warrior Gaming. It's actually my favorite channel because, if anyone goes in there like, I'm thinking of buying this console, hey, you're going to get great reviews and great content. And the thing about gamified training, if you compare it to, say, looking at slides or looking, or say kind of reading or just like exercises, I can't say that I've never had some, compulsory training and it's like click, 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 answer 3 multiple choice questions and I'm done. But what about if we could make it gamified? Hey, what if we make it about points? When I was about, I think 7 or 8, I used to do like Key Stage 1 that had this maths video game and it had like these platforms. So, hey, I'm here and it says, 3 minus 3. For me, those were the hardest, the double negative. And then you would have like here, like 0 and 10 and 6 and you pick the right one. And if you got it wrong, it would fall. And that's how you move across. So gamification does work. It's really fun. And it's also a great way of learning and absorbing the subliminal knowledge. Insights and data. I don't know about you guys, but I do kind of like to see my behavior. For years, I've thought about installing on my app, on my phone, the app that tracks where you're doing or how many times you log into your phone a day. But when it comes to learning, it's very useful to find out, say, your strengths. Awesome, ego boost, but also your weaknesses. Say, for example, I've done loads of OWASP training and, my weakness is in A2 authentication. And the company has a big, song and dance about authentication because it keeps coming up in SaaS. Maybe if I do more A2 training, I'll be better equipped and then my apps won't fail. So whenever we do these kind of exercises or learnings, it's good to know, how you're scoring. Self-paced, no one really likes being told what to do. It's okay having, like, in my last company, we had improvement days. So that was every other Thursday, you get half a day to do what you want within reason. So it was do what you want, and that could, benefit the company. I got my AWS Solutions Architect cert, like that kind of stuff. But having self-paced training that you can log in, whether it's first thing in the morning or last thing in the afternoon or just before lunch, or sometimes when you have a lull in the day in between meetings, you're like, maybe I could do 5-10 minutes of training. Isn't that great? And finally, tailored. There's no point in giving, say, for example, memory allocation training to, say, for example, Java, Python, Go, because memory tends to be a bit of an issue with, say, COBOL and C. And likewise, obviously, I know I'm speaking to Java developers, but hey, let's talk about the OWASP top 10, including A4, XXE, and any Go developers would be like, well, Go gets rid of XXE. And like Python Django gets rid of SQL injection. So it's important to have training that's pertinent to you. And even to those on the call, I'm sure some of you use Spring and some of you use structs. And many of the other, JSP, JSF, EESC, etc. And imagine if I was like, right, and today we're just going to look at Java servlets. I'm sure about 80% of the call would probably just switch off because that might not be as relevant. So the key to kind of sum this up is to have all of these facets to, really engage and have developers. So this is where it gets fun. Don't worry, you don't have to do anything right now. I'm not going to position it around to anyone on the call. But now it's your turn. So I was tempted to put, the sore face, like, do you want to play a game? But then, I don't know, that movie as a teenager terrified me. So I wanted to keep it a bit better. That's the undertones. So in 2 weeks' time, it's very, very, very exciting. Secure Code Warrior are working together with London Java community, and we are going to have a virtual secure coding tournament. So that is going to be in 2 weeks today. So it's 2 weeks on Thursday. So July the 30th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. And in order to register, please click here. Well, I'll move the mouse, and I'm gonna talk for another minute maybe. But feel free to screenshot. This is the link to the landing page. I know London Java community are going to be sending out information about this. And the great thing for those on this call is everything I've talked about in terms of development and security and rockstars and gamified training. So for those that don't know Secure Code Warrior, I didn't properly introduce me because I don't want this to be a sales pitch, but we have a gamified security platform. For those that register on this link, you will have 2 weeks of access to the platform. And say, I don't know, maybe you're an imposter, you're actually a JavaScript or maybe a Go or a COBOL developer. You can actually join and do a different language, that's fine. But you can register, and then you'll have access to our platform, and you will have the opportunity to try these gamified exercises. We work with a lot of enterprise and a lot of customers. Who knows, maybe the place you're working right now actually uses Secure Code Warrior, in which case, awesome. And once you've registered, you will have access to training. And then in 2 weeks, we have a Java tournament. So like I said, if you're the imposter that doesn't code Java, unfortunately, the tournament is just Java, and it's a range. It's kind of JSP, JSF, Spring. We've got some APIs. We've got Android. And there'll be more information via email. But what I'd say for those on the call, if you haven't already screenshotted, or at least, follow LJC and, go for the Eventbrite, you can register here to get some early access, because the reality is it's a tournament and you've got to train. So if you log in and try the exercises, you're much more likely to win. And I'm pretty sure, I know at least from Secure Code Warrior, we'll be providing some prizes. But not only that, you will have the kudos and the title of the LJC Secure Code Warrior. So I'm really excited about that. Like I said, it is in 2 weeks. My understanding is LJC hasn't done anything like this before. So I'll be here to hold your hand and walk you through this. And then finally, I hope you've enjoyed my talk, learned a little bit about yourselves, about the industry, about security rockstars. If you do want to reach out, my name's Stefania Chaplin. LinkedIn is great. Pop me over an email. I'm on Twitter as well, so feel free. We've also got, the usual company. This is our, this is our website, etc. And so now, I hope you've all enjoyed this, and thank you so much for your time. And so I'm going to go. Any questions? Oh, also, I've just realized if you have been posting in chat, I can't actually read the chat at the moment because I'm sharing my screen. I know Barry said there might be a co-host. I don't know if that's been organized. But if you want to type your question, or if you want to say your question, I can obviously answer it. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed today.
Hey, Stefana. I am the co-host that Barry promised you. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll actually relay them over. But I really appreciated your talk on security and how it's important for developers to be aware of this. And so one thing I was wondering was, what do you think is kind of the most important thing? If somebody is not a security developer, but they want to be aware of issues and just relevant security things to be aware of as a developer, what would you say is kind of like the number one, number two most important things for a non-security developer to be aware of?
Sure, that's a really great question. So thank you so much. So I'm assuming, your person is non, but has an interest in it, because obviously that's why they'd be wanting to find out more. And I would, start small in terms of, don't beat yourself up about not knowing anything. I remember when I went to uni at 18 to do computer science and I knew nothing. So I think some of the key things, a good place to start is the OWASP top 10, which is why I referenced it in some of my earlier slides. The other one that comes across is the CWE top 25, which stands for common weaknesses and enumerations, and that's like type of bugs, so like buffer overflow or SQL injection, etc. And those are kind of standards that most people are familiar with. And in terms of my company, Secure Code Warrior, we have a gamified training platform, and we have free website trials. And included in this, it's not only the opportunity to learn by doing and clicking. We also have learning resources, so you can like watch really short videos. I think when I joined Secure Code Warrior, before I joined, like when I was interviewing, I actually looked on our YouTube, and there are little short videos, 2 to 5 minutes. I'm like, oh yeah, what is an OS command conjecture? Or, oh, what's SSRF? Like, what does it stand for? What does it mean? So yeah, it's good to get a kind of an understanding. I'm not going to, specifically point everyone to Secure Code Warrior, but I kind of am. But obviously, if that's not available, focus on the common frameworks to at least get an understanding. I did some sales training, for my internal sales team, where I looked at the OWASP. And the way I compared it to is like building safety standards, like wear a helmet. And it's like, wash your hands. It's kind of common sense. So even stuff like broken access control, it sounds technical, but the way I can simplify it is like, don't make everyone an admin. Deny by default. Only give people the permissions they need. So although security can seem like sometimes a scary concept for those that aren't familiar with security, actually when you break it down, it's not so bad. And once you have a little bit of a grasp, or even before not, platforms like Secure Code Warrior or others can help you hone that skill.
Nice, thanks. And we have had a couple questions come through. So the first one, I can answer that is the video going to be available? You should be able to reach out to Barry afterwards. If you'd like the video, it should be available though. And a question for you is, any tips for running effective threat modeling sessions?
Oh, this is a good question. So I can almost feel like I could switch presentations, because I did yesterday actually, I did sales training and it was about threat modeling. And there was a really good example. It was Bruce. I don't know if you literally Google threat modeling and look at images, that's how I do most of my presentations. But there's a Bruce Wayne Batman threat modeling, where on the left you have assets. So, Batcave, Alfred, I think it was emails or communications. And then on the other side, you have threats. So the Joker, the press, the cops, all that. And then you've got high risk and low risk. And in the middle, that's where you have your, kind of protection. So whether that's encryption, whether that's, disabling location. Like, it was a very simplified, and it was a very, kind of almost trivial example. But I think that's a good way to introduce. I was actually at DevSecOn a few weeks ago. I say I was there. It was all virtual. But I actually saw one of my better presentations. I can't remember his name now, but this guy did a Star Wars threat modeling presentation. And literally, by the end of the talk, I wanted to give him a standing ovation, because the way that he explained the different personas and related them to Star Wars, etc. So I think to answer the initial question, if you want to make things kind of interactive and fun and kind of sink in, it's good to resonate either with kind of popular culture, or keep it, keep it light and fun, have it simplified. You're not delivering a white paper. You're not, reading a scientific paper. This is about training. So this is about resonating ideas that will sink in. Like, I was in another webinar, and there was someone talking about how he explained to his 15-year-old son. I can't remember what it's actually called in physics, but it's when you heat something up and then it takes longer to heat down. There's a special term for that. Sorry, I'm not a physics amazing, but it's to do with like something to do with water and anyway. And he was like to his son, tomatoes. Take some, heat them up quickly, takes a long time to heat down. So having those kind of links, that can really help. So like Secure Code Warrior, we specifically, we don't really look at threat modeling as such. That's not our sweet spot. Otherwise I'd say, hey, go to the platform. But I think for your case, in terms of what you're doing, you know, keep it engaging, keep it light, and that helps people absorb it.
Cool. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions queued up right now, though if anybody has any, you know, feel free to either hop off mute rather, or just pop them in the chat. So did you have anything else you wanted to mention, Stefana?
No, other than obviously thank you everyone for joining. If I go back a slide, we do have the tournament in 2 weeks, so you'll see me again there, and I hope to see everyone there. It will be fun. And yeah, if you do have any questions or you want to reach out to me personally, I've got my contact details as well. And thank you for having me, London Java community. As I said on Twitter, you are one of my favorite meetups.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And everybody have a good night.
Perfect. Thank you so much.